This is Sahil, and you're listening to the Studio 21 Show, where I talk with the people designing the Bitcoin products that we all use every single day. My honest hope is that through these casual walk and talk conversations, we all get real world insights on designing Bitcoin products directly from the people in the trenches. Today, I talk with Lee Gordon, who is a lead designer at Fold. He has a totally star-studded background and actually shares a lot of nuggets from Fold's redesign, how they think about the design process overall, and a ton more. It was super fun to record. I really hope you enjoy it. And now join me on my walk and talk with Lee Gordon.
Yeah, texting, that would be some crazy.
That would be nuts, huh? that would be multitasking like crazy.
Multitasking skills.
Yeah, man.
But like, sorry, I'm just on Bumble right now.
You don't matter at all. Yeah. No, dude, thanks for coming. I'm really glad you're here. When you said you were here, I was like, okay, I need to take advantage of this opportunity because I don't see Lee that often.
Yeah, man.
So that's cool.
Yeah, once a year.
It's about once a year, I feel like. Yeah, something like that. I have so much I feel like I want to talk to you about.
Awesome.
And that I haven't asked you. So
awesome.
And yeah, it's pretty casual, just conversation, right? Not like an interview or anything, but
yeah, cool.
So
any excuse to talk about Bitcoin.
Any excuse to talk about Bitcoin, and also just like your past. For the first time I looked up your LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, okay, so you've had a really interesting past. You're at RGA.
Yeah.
You were at Nokia.
Yep.
Obviously, you've done Lightning Lab stuff. I don't know if that's public, but you.
Yeah, that is public. Stuff. Yeah.
And by the way, you were not just IC, you were leadership positions across all these different things.
Yep.
How the heck did that happen? First of all, how did you get into design?
Yeah.
And how did you end up all these like star-studded places?
Thanks, man. Yeah. Well, luck mostly, but also just hustle and luck. That's the formula, right? Yeah. But the design story is kind of a funny one. I actually studied creative writing and poetry all through undergrad, and I got a master's degree in it.
Wow.
At New School in New York. But to pay for my master's degree in a worthless degree, I was working in the computer lab at Parsons. And I was just like always a computer nerd and loved recording music. For a long time, I was into the kind of rave scene in Houston and recording electronic music.
Oh, so this was Houston?
Yeah, I was in Houston growing up. I went to University of Houston for my undergrad. And then, I went out to New York for this poetry master's degree. And while I was out there, I was working in the computer lab at Parsons. And this kid comes up to me one day and says, can you help me out with this Photoshop bug I'm having? And I was like, sure. I go, and he's like, yeah, I'm trying to like get this thing over here and like move this thing and add this layer or whatever he was trying to do. And I was like, oh, you just gotta, go to the layers panel. I don't know, whatever, you do in Photoshop. And way back in the day, this was early 2000s. And he was like, hey, do you want to do my homework for me? Nice. So I got a reputation at Parsons as the guy in the computer lab that would do your like design homework for you. And I kind of started a side hustle doing design work for Parsons students. So I always like to say like an adjunct design degree from Parsons.
That's insane. That's wow. Okay.
And while I was in school there, I realized I had a knack for some of that stuff, and I started freelancing design work, and I worked in a lot of agencies because back then, this is 2004, 2005, when I was first getting into it, there wasn't a lot of design jobs in tech companies. It was all advertising, and that's what led me to RGA because they were doing cool stuff with products, and I got to work on Nike Plus, like the old version of it.
Wow.
Yeah, so you had a little pod that you'd stick in the sole of your shoe. And,
really? Wow.
You'd like hook that thing up to your computer with your iPod. And I worked on that and some other cool projects at RGA. I opened an office for RGA in Sydney, Australia. So that was a big game changer in my career. And
by the way, they have an office here at downtown.
They do, yeah.
And their Twitter account is really funny.
It's hilarious.
I like their Twitter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, they do have some funny copywriters over there.
Yeah.
It was a good place then to kind of cut your teeth, and a lot of people from that industry spread out into FANG, and as the tech companies started to absorb designers, RGA was almost like a recruiting station for that.
And you had a little bit of a like in and out kind of thing. You came back.
Yeah, that was definitely a boomerang.
That's cool.
Yeah, I worked there. I left and worked at Barnes and Noble on the Nook, their little e-reader from like 2008-ish, 2007, I don't remember. went back to RGA, worked there for a little bit longer, left, moved to Australia, went back, and they opened the office there to help them ramp up their design department. And yeah, I've always been a little bit of a nomad, so staying at one place has been challenging, especially when we had to work in offices.
Yeah, you travel a lot, I feel like.
Yeah. It's a big part
Okay.
of my life and my identity right now. I've been traveling for the last 4 years, ever since COVID
Yeah.
and all the lockdowns. Got a van and turned it into a big part of the way I
Yeah.
operate.
Well, I feel like remote's been great in that regard. I was
Yeah.
kind of not a big fan at first, and now I'm kind of I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's nice to meet every quarter or something on a regular cadence, but then, to figure out what to work on. But then when you're doing the work, it's kind of liking remote. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess as Bitcoiners too, we're all about freedom.
Yeah.
And being able to be an adult and make your own schedule
and some jurisdictional arbitrage, maybe.
Exactly,
maybe some of that.
exactly, which was part of the van life for me. Like when you don't have a lot of dry powder sitting around, you have to figure out ways to create your own, or lower those expenses. And the van was a really good way to do that. Unless you're in California, and then the gas prices pretty much kill all that.
It's just not, that's not worth it. So, but really quick, one thing I noticed that I mentioned earlier was, I feel like you've done IC roles and you've done management. I don't know, you call it leadership, whatever you want to call it. How do you like make a distinction between the two? And is there one you like?
Yeah.
Because now you're in more of like a leadership role. I'm assuming you do some IC work as well, but
a lot.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I think, the larger the organization, definitely the more of a need there is for those pure management roles. For me personally, that was not ever something that I was interested in doing. I always liked being on tools and staying with what's kind of happening in the design world, and especially the way that technology moves. It can be really easy to just like lose touch with what's happening and how things are built. And I think that was always something that drew me to the industries that I've worked in the first place.
You mean like the constant growth or the change, maybe?
Yeah, like how data became a huge part of athleticism. That like I got experience that and work in that industry when I was at RGA working on the Nike project, and then in other places with the Kindle or the Barnes and Noble Nook, like how people are reading, that kind of thing. But I think like, some people are just really good managers, and the larger the organization, you need that. But I was always a little bit more interested in the strategy, the building of the thing. And so for me, at least now in my career, I like that sweet spot of being able to, help people grow their careers, give people the opportunity to some of the same opportunities that I got to make my life better by, having the skill. So giving that kind of mentorship has always been really fulfilling for me. But then also I get the fulfillment of being able to like influence the strategic vision, and also be able to kind of execute on it in the lower level, UI design and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it kind of feels like player-coach relationship, fair to say. Like it's because you're also in the weeds to some extent, and then you're also helping the team.
Yes, exactly. And that's a lot of how I like to lead, by letting people do their own thing and make their own mistakes, and being there to kind of help them when a mistake is made, or to celebrate with them when they choose the right path. And also it's two-way. It's not like you turn 46 and work in an industry for 10 or 15 years or however long it's been for me, and you're just like suddenly some kind of god. You like still have a lot to learn. And you can learn from anyone. You have to have that beginner mind always, otherwise you just kind of ossify and stop growing, and then your career's over.
No, I love that, because if I just think back in my past managers, the best ones have always been the ones who are doing exactly what you're saying. Like they do get in the weeds, maybe not for everything, but at least they have that creative direction to some extent. And they're also a coach. It's like a mix of both, and those have been the most fun ones to work with, I feel like.
Same. I had a great kind of leadership mentor at RGA, a couple of them, and they really kind of showed me that was the way. And if you're excited about, especially in agencies where you're trying to get put on the fun projects, there's a bench, and that's like next stop you're getting fired. And you don't want to be on the bench, but you definitely don't want to be working on the, I won't mention any brand names, but there were certain ones that like no one really wanted to work on when they were at the telecom industries, like that was where they sent you to kind of, you knew you weren't doing very good when you got sent over there.
That's an interesting dynamic I never thought of. I've never worked at an agency, so I've never thought
Yeah,
about that
okay.
dynamic where it's like
Yeah,
you may almost have to advocate for your position
you
to
did. Yeah,
and
you
maybe
did.
to some extent within a company you may have to advocate for certain projects. Maybe that's the
Mhm.
analogy, but
I think you're right.
yeah.
I think you're right. A lot of that, as the larger tech companies have absorbed these design departments, some of them have even absorbed entire agencies. Like Adaptive Path, I think, was
Hmm.
acquired by, was it Citibank way back in the day? Interesting that a bank,
Yeah.
would acquire a UX company. And of course, that never really went anywhere.
Didn't go well.
But anyways, these larger companies want that setup because, you motivate designers and you hire good designers by having fun stuff for them to work on. So that's definitely part of the carrot that helps people develop their careers, getting them into the fun stuff.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so and we can always come back if there's more thoughts around like leadership, management, that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk a little bit about like Fold.
Yeah. Awesome.
I
Sure.
really,
I'm
I mean,
excited to talk about it
obviously, yeah, we
too.
both have a lot to say. We've talked about Fold stuff for a long time.
Yes.
We work together on and off on things.
Yes.
I really want to hear about the redesign and the redesign from multiple aspects, right? So I think part of it is, and tell me where I'm wrong, but I think part of it, because you're on the inside, part of it is the storytelling.
Yeah.
Which obviously I think is a big part of the design job is like, it's marketing too, but design job is like storytelling.
Definitely.
That's one. There's a visual design aspect to it.
Definitely.
There's the brand, which maybe is part of storytelling. So there's a lot of that. I'm just, open-ended.
I love that.
Where do you
Yeah.
want to start?
Well, let's start there.
Yeah.
I think storytelling is a really good hook for us to have a fun conversation because today, as the price climbs
Phew.
into the 90s,
When this goes out, it might be, who knows? I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
it seems to be following the weather in Austin right now,
It does. It is. Yeah.
But, we went through a round of ETFs, and no matter how you feel about that, institutional adoption of a technology is always a sign of it growing up. We just, elected our first Bitcoin president.
Yeah.
No matter how you feel about that, it's a clear indicator that this technology is growing up. And we're a long ways away from the days when, Satoshi was pretty scared about WikiLeaks picking it up as a payment processor and thought that it was going to be the end of Bitcoin back then. It would be great to hear what he thinks about what's happening today. But yeah, that said, growing up as a company that's focused completely on that technology that is growing up, it seems like it would be doing a disservice to the storytelling of our brand and our company if we weren't growing up with that technology and portraying ourselves, in a different light. I think the original designs that Rachel Mirsky did, shout out to her.
Shout out to Rachel, by the way.
Yeah,
Like,
she's a
incredible person, incredible designer, I feel like.
For sure. And what she did for the Fold brand back in the day, perfect for what it was then. Really lined up with the culture and the zeitgeist, and it was fun and kind of irreverent and had that kind of game element to it.
The spin wheel.
The spin wheel was really key to that. I think, that brings, and still today brings people back daily. I was just hanging out with my mom and she was like, "Ooh, I didn't spin my spin wheel today."
That's adorable.
It was really cute. And I was like, okay, good. At least the boomers are definitely into it. And I think a lot of people do like to come back because it's free money, right? It's for anyone who did any testnet development, it's that faucet, but it's a mainnet faucet.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're trying to stay in line with growing up, the going public part of Fold that's currently in process. And
right, that's a big deal. The going public part of it is like, not to put it too fine a point on it, but I remember when Fold, and maybe you were going here and I don't want to throw you off your story, but like, I remember when LN Pizza, like, that kind of like those, I guess that's like starting days of Fold basically, right?
Yeah, it was.
So like spending Bitcoin with Lightning, getting gift cards, Domino's, that kind of thing.
It was.
And now growing up to like public company.
Yes.
Basically financial services. Yeah. And now you're competing with all the other financial services companies, basically.
Exactly. So. And I think proud moment, not only for Fold, but for Bitcoin that, we have our first pure play Bitcoin company trying to make that public offering happen. And regulatory environment hopefully shifting, it's looking pretty positive. So I think we would have been doing, again, a disservice if we didn't start to look into the world of design, see how other companies that are on that level were portraying themselves, and make sure that we're representing Bitcoin in the most, accurate way possible, not this super serious, all blue
right.
kind of, Chase Bank feel or whatever bank feel. We're trying to make it as Bitcoin as possible, but still be, serious. And
So what are some of those ways? Because people can, it's an audio only thing. So people have to go to the Fold website. I guess it's foldapp.com, I think. Check it out. But some of the things, like off the top of my head, right? Serif font, cliche, but it's like way more form. Maybe not form is a wrong word, but like mature. I think.
Well,
It looks incredible.
I'll tell a little bit of the story around that too, because Rachel's going to get more props, because we were able to bring her back in as a consultant on the new brand. So we got to have the OG goat come back and take
Which, by the way,
Rachel, again.
Not to dox Rachel, I won't say anything where she lives, but I do want to get Rachel on as well. So I hope that can happen soon.
Definitely reach out to her. She's doing some really cool stuff. She's amazing.
Hey, just a really quick break to tell you about the Studio 21 newsletter. If you're interested in Bitcoin and design, every month I highlight a few key pieces of Bitcoin or design related news or education. I think you're really going to find it valuable. So if you're interested, take a look. Go to sahilc.com/newsletter, give it a subscribe, and look forward to seeing you there. Now back to the episode.
But so she came back in. We worked hard to kind of create a few different briefs of like different directions that we could go. And we had this kind of original outline of 3 different directions. Because I think in design, a lot of times when you're trying to create something that's net new,
this train is really
Should we pause for a second?
Maybe. I mean, it's okay. We can keep going. This is part of the
ambiance.
It's part of the charm, I think. Like, I'm probably not even gonna edit this out. Just gonna leave it in there. But yeah, keep going.
That's fine. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in the 3 direction philosophy, because if you have 2 directions, they get really binary. You have 3 directions, you can kind of create a little bit of chaos. It's an uneven number, so it feels a little bit imbalanced, and it really challenges designers to think of what is that third option, because it's really easy to go like black and white or full color, or like super fun or like really pared back and serious. But then when you have that third option in the middle, it's like, well, how do I pull the energies from those other 2 directions into this kind of third direction?
I hadn't thought of that.
So it kind of creates, I think, a little bit of a stretch and a challenge for a designer, and that's always going to enhance the final outcomes. And a big part of design is getting stakeholder approval. And when you have 2 directions, you'll tend to have your stakeholders divided in half on them. And it can be really hard to, create consensus when you have a half and half kind of scenario. So 3 directions is great. So one of the things I was kind of looking into at the beginning was how can you kind of inspire, people into these 3 different areas. And so I started to look into what's the history of Bitcoin and what's the current day of Bitcoin, and how can we kind of create these names for the directions. So a lot of times in a brief, I'll write, what's the name of each direction? We had these 3 directions. The first one was Austrian economics. And it was, the brief was, if Dieter Rams were to build a Bitcoin wallet, what would it look like? Pared back, single color hits to show the user where to go next.
And by the way, not to interrupt you, but tactically, so when you're saying, are you starting off with mood boards and stuff, or is this literally just a brief and you're giving it to, in this case, Rachel?
Mood boards, definitely, so you're also, definitely mood boards written up. I'm a big, with a creative writing background, I'm a big believer in using painting a picture with words as much as you can with the mood boards. It gives you a story to tell. I think story is a good theme for design, and for this episode maybe. But so the Austrian economics was direction 1. Bitcoin City was direction 2. Let's imagine a world where we're on the Bitcoin standard, and what does that world look like, and what's the wallet that drives it? So a lot of it's very kind of aspirational as well. And then the third one was this kind of all black, like very pared back, just kind of Bitcoin maxi, like, you know, single-minded, laser focused, and just really pared back. So those were the three directions that I handed over to Rachel. And then she sprinkled her magic pixie dust on all of that sort of stuff. And the point that I'm kind of trying to make with this is she morphed these things into three different directions. I couldn't really draw a direct line between the brief that I wrote and the directions that she created, but the first one that was kind of out of the Dieter Rams, like, you know, Austrian economics concept was this sort of distill the Dutch sort of execution of architecture where you have those big kind of like red primary color blocks. So she had an execution that was very kind of like inspired by that, and it really kind of took it to the next level. And then there was a couple of other, the Bitcoin Maxi was just like grayscale. And grayscale is kind of having a moment right now, I think, in the design world. And so that was like kind of a fun way to like kind of flex in something that's very topical right now. But the third one, and the one that we all very much liked and maybe was most closely related to the Bitcoin City concept, was what you kind of see today with those serif fonts.
And the gradient, not gradient, but like a, kind of gradienty, not mesh, but like, I think there's like bulbs. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, there's like, one of my favorite hidden features on the app is if you open up on the home screen, you'll see these little bulbs, and they're actually moving, they're animated. But no one really notices.
You don't notice it. I mean, subtle. I noticed it right away, but it's hard to, you have to really look closely.
You definitely have to be a designer.
Yeah, I feel like, which is nice because it's subtle enough that you almost don't notice it, but it's like, I feel like it's subconsciously you notice it.
Yes.
It's with the overall vibe, which is
totally
nice. And that's one of the things I liked about, and I'm sure I'll talk more to Rachel about it as well, but that's one of the things I liked a lot about the brand is it feels so unique compared to, I'm thinking of other Bitcoin financial services, right? Like Strike has kind of like a punky, all black punk vibe. Unchained is buttoned up blue, typical financial services. OnRamp has its own thing going. Cash App is hip hop kind of, you know, so it's really cool that so much.
I think she did a great job in taking those briefs and like finding that really cool sweet spot where Fold could sit. And thanks for calling that out, because we really were trying to find what's our differentiation here, besides just being a Bitcoin only company that places us amongst those competitors with you know, a refinement that's hopefully on par with them, even though we're operating at like less than 1% of the design team of a lot of those places that you just mentioned. But yeah, she did a great job. And I think you brought up serif font. When she had her first kind of executions with that serif font, she was referencing the 90s. And I'm sure if you get her on the podcast, she'll talk a lot more in depth about this, because I think it was a really cool way to frame it. But she was talking about the 90s Apple ads. If you go and look at those like 80s, 90s Apple ads, you know, the like 1984 TV spot that's like super famous in advertising land for advertising nerds out there, they were using serif fonts. And serif fonts have like pretty much been washed of any kind of like tech or app. And they have so much personality. There's some really beautiful ones that are still being designed today, but mostly used in print.
And I think they're just now making a comeback in tech, like Perplexity and a lot of these guys. It's like finally coming.
Finally coming back. So, you know, as
perfect
usual,
timing.
Rachel is on the bleeding edge of that.
Yeah, well done.
So I think, and you know, that was one of those places where, you know, having really strong design talent, you know, in the project, working on it was important. And I think the outcomes of it have been great. They've been received well, and it gave us some great purchase to build our design systems on. And, you know, having these serif fonts as a print artifact as well will help us, you know, with other things like, you know, online, website executions. And we're going to be coming out with some kind of interesting stuff in gift cards soon. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting kind of segue, and not the best segue out there, but it is a segue. Let's put it that way.
Sometimes you got to work.
Sometimes you got to give it your best shot, and that's all I can do. But you mentioned gift cards. There's a lot of different types of customers out there, right? With across companies, but also I feel like within Fold, there's like, I mean, you've seen this a lot more than I have, but there's the people that want the max rewards, they want the spins. There's some people like me who are the power user, get on zero, no dollars. How are you thinking about that, or is it an ongoing thing of like,
Mm-hmm.
who do we want to think about, and are there multiple personas? Like,
Yeah.
how do you think about that? Who do you want to
Well,
target?
one of the things I do at Fold, and I think is, I am a designer, but I think I'm probably a better researcher than a, pixel pushing designer.
Huh.
So one of the things I do at Fold is a lot of usability research and just trying to understand what our users want and need, and that's kind of a fun place to play. And it's something that I've focused on in the last year is how our card boosts and gift cards and all of that sort of stuff is received by our users. So that's one way that we try and differentiate,
Which, by the way, I should give some credit to other people at Fold too. This is one thing I've noticed about, not that other companies don't do this, but Fold, I think in particular, is really good at the community response. Like, I know Brian, even Will. Will is in, we have a Get on Zero Telegram group, which is not very big, but Will is very active in there and just like listening to these like psychos. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that's pretty unique.
He's a psycho himself, so
that's
fits
true.
in well.
He is.
And shout out to Matt Precourt as well. He's been managing our Discord for some time.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he's really good. There's a lot of people at Fold that from their different kind of expertise area are good at pulling that feedback in. It's great. It's like one of the first things I noticed when I started working there. Usually at a startup, you don't have that same kind of company or customer outreach happening. You'll have a customer support, shout out to Jeremy, kind of division that has a little bit of an ear to the ground, or at least they know what's not working. But having real community members and managers out there taking that information in and sharing it with everyone, and then the design department gets to pull all of that data in.
Right.
Not just the stuff that we're creating, and everyone has an opinion about it, because one of the problems with research is you tend to get, especially if you're designing the thing that you're researching, you can very easily like have bias about what you want to be the right answer.
Oh yeah, it's so easy.
When you have a triangulation of a bunch of different people, like you just mentioned, it can really help to round out the edges and take the bias away, and hopefully we get to better versions of things. But yeah, with gift cards, and also gift cards was just like the OG part of Fold. When I was at Lightning Labs and we had developed the wallet, Fold was the first, other company where I could use the wallet that I'd helped design and see how it functions. So
yeah, that's pretty
me
cool.
and Will were stress testing both of our products before we even worked together.
That's awesome.
High-fiving each other on Twitter when it was working.
So how do you think through that? And even if it's not Fold specific, like you don't have to give it a quote unquote official Fold position, but like you just have all these different types of users. And I'm just thinking something like Unchained, which I'm sure even they're evolving over time, where they seem very institutional, but maybe they're targeting high net worth individuals. Maybe sometimes they're not. Maybe they were in the past. Maybe now they're not. It changes for different people. Like, I'm sure Strike is something different. Cash App is different. So like, what do you think is the thought process to get to some answer?
I think of it like, when you look at a company, it's kind of like, you think of the way that information is stored naturally, like in DNA or in crystals, and it's like information's kind of like folded on top of itself, which, pun to fold maybe.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. By the way, we can turn around here. Yeah.
And I think what we've created is a product that has a product to market fit. And what we need to do is start going through the archives of that information that has folded together to build this sort of entity, and see if the information that's above the surface, if the products that we have above the surface that people are using every day, if there's more opportunity there that we can draw on, if there's like more enhancements that we can do to enhance the product, then we need to do that. Gift cards is definitely one of those places, because I think, people like to get those rewards. It's part of their daily pattern from the research that I've done.
Wow.
Found that people just buy, they have like 2 or 3 gift cards that they buy every month, and they just buy them, apply them to their account.
Which, by the way, is fascinating to your point about bias, is because if you were to ask me as an outsider, without having talked to any Fold customers, I would say get rid of the gift cards. I don't use them. I don't like them. It's not part of my flow. So that's a good point about, like, sometimes it's not about you. In fact, it's never about you.
It's really not. And that's why, like, dog fooding your product is good, but like also talking to other people who use it is really good too. And from inside the trenches, whenever we remove or move around anything that affects people's rewards, Like we definitely hear about it. There
I
are
remember, yeah, I remember
lots of
something.
people.
I remember hearing about some stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Our users are amazing and are very vocal about what they like and what they don't like. And so, yeah, we listen to that and we try and enhance things. And as a company that's about to go public, we need to think of things that are going to
Mm,
increase shareholder value. And when we have a product that's generating revenue, it's like, how can we enhance that and create that a tighter fit with the market so that revenue increases?
yeah. So I guess speaking of going public and kind of maturing, we talked about that before.
Mm-hmm.
How are you? I mean, it's kind of cliche at this point in terms of like design zeitgeist, especially with companies like Linear and
Mm-hmm.
Perplex. All these companies, they focus so much on craft and polish.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think about that at all? How do you think about it, if at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I mean, at this point, we are still a startup and staffed like a startup.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's going to be some polish that's just not going to happen sometimes. And it pains me. But we're trying to move fast and hopefully not break things. So sometimes, the design of a thing will be maybe not as polished as we would like it to be, but we are trying to improve our efficiency. And again, in improving shareholder value, a lot of times, it's the salaries of the employees that's the biggest draw, or probably 100% of the time, the salaries of the employees is the biggest draw on the resources that the company,
Yeah.
the revenue that it's making. So what I am really interested in as a leader in our department is how can we improve efficiency to maintain and hopefully improve the craft of what we're building with less bodies and chairs. So there's a few ways that we've been doing that. One of them is,
Yeah, because that sounds like really tough to do, right?
yeah, it's not easy. It's something that I think, well, when you add more staff, it adds more complexity, and
That's
Bitcoin's
true.
all about simplicity and doing more with less. And I try and adopt that as a principle for my
Yeah.
team.
Mm-hmm.
So we're currently operating as me and one full-time freelancer and a couple of retainer freelancers
Mm-hmm.
that come in and out as we need them. So that way we can kind of flex to grow the team or expand or decrease our cash flow or our OpEx
Mm-hmm.
to allow us to do what we need to do in certain amounts of time, or when there's not a lot coming through, we can kind of shrink back down and have less OpEx. So it's a nice way to do that. And another thing I really love about design, if you're familiar with like Corbusier's modular, is the idea that when you create
He's the architect?
constraints, yeah, he was an
Yeah,
architect,
yeah.
and he created a game that used, Fibonacci sequences and stuff like that to create layouts that you could use for graphic design or for floor plans of new buildings and that kind of thing. And what he was really into is like, how can I constrain this as much as possible from the beginning so that I can kind of come up with the best results. And I think that's true to the way you operate a team. If the team is constrained, it may be a little bit stressful for those people in the team, but it forces us to come up with more efficient ways of working.
That's fascinating, and that it's probably good to some extent as well as when, because I've seen this as well as when, and I'm sure we've all seen this, is like your team gets bloated,
Yes.
and then you're in a down cycle, and it's not
Yes.
fun for everyone. You got to
Right.
so that's a good point. Yeah, the flexing is kind of interesting, and
That's
it seems
it.
like a lot of people are actually going in that direction of like either freelancing or working with
Yeah.
freelancers with some
Yeah.
flex approach,
Yeah.
which depending on maybe your personality type or whatever
Totally.
might work. But that's
Totally.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's helpful. So one of the things that, shout out to Max, our full-time freelance designer, Ukrainian escapee,
Oh yeah.
living his best life in Barcelona right now.
Nice. Shout out Max.
He's a great system designer, and he's been really helping us a lot with creating a design system that makes it much easier to build things fast and keep consistency and be more efficient, which is the name of the game. The more efficient we can be, the more we can do with less. I think everyone's going to benefit from that, from the shareholders down to the people actually working on the product. And we're not hiring people before it's time and then having to fire them later.
No,
and
that's
like
the
I just
worst.
don't want to be in that place. I'd rather be more stressed out for longer until I'm sure we need that extra body than fire someone, because, and a lot of times it's like been a lot of time and you think about who you're hiring and who you want to work with, and when you're sure about it, you want them to be able to be there as long as they want.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a big part of it as well. So design systems have been really good from the research angle. Something I'm really interested in is how we can use AI to improve our institutional knowledge. Like we were saying before, we're pulling from all these different data sources from, that looks fun.
Oh yeah, there's fishing going on here.
Yeah.
In the river here in Austin.
From all the different sources that we're pulling our information from,
Yes.
you know, we have our customer support team, we have our business analytics team, we have, you know, Matt in Discord, you know, just talking to the people, Will on Twitter and everywhere else he is. You know, there's like so many channels that we're pulling information from in addition to the UX research that we're doing. Once that institutional knowledge comes into our organization, it just gets fragmented into all of those silos, and it makes it really hard to find insights that you know you can action on, especially with light teams and all the constraints we were talking about before. Yeah. So something that's been a side passion project of mine is like, how can we use LLMs and maybe one day in a distant future have our own kind of privatized LLM that's just trained on all of the data sets I just described. So anyone in the company can go and through natural language kind of query, what do you want to know? And it's pulling from all of those different data sources and giving us insights that we can action on.
Okay, so I love this topic.
Yeah.
Because I've been very interested in this as well.
Yeah.
And I've also been looking at, hey, what, because the exact same thing, right? Like,
yeah,
you're on customer calls, you're on this, you're on that, and you're working on a project and you want to aggregate all these sources and then pull out insights, pull out highlights, and then maybe you want to share them with the team, like even as simple as just like sharing it with leadership.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so what I found, I'm curious what you think about this, what we've been experimenting with at Foundry is a tool called Dovetail.
Okay.
Look into that. So it's basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
You pull in all these sources, whether it's text or videos, it'll transcribe the whole video, it'll auto pull out insights. You can like on a board organize these insights. You can like clip them. It'll be like literally clips of, I have clips of customers.
That's right.
And pull them out and use them in certain ways. So I love where you're going with that.
And is it clips like recordings of conversations, like customer support and stuff like that?
And you can even on their enterprise plan, you can like for privacy, you can blur out their faces or their names or whatever if you want to do that.
Yeah,
like
I love that.
Request that
because my current workflow with the research is I have like a Google Drive folder with all the transcripts from all the Google Meet meetings that I've done. Yeah. And when back before LLMs, the way I would run a research project is I would take the transcripts, I would rewatch everything at the end of a sprint, of a research sprint, and write it up into a report. And then the report gets ossified and that becomes the thing. But of course, like in that constrained amount of time, you're not going to draw every insight from that information. And if you ever want to go and triangulate a study that you did in 2022 with some insights that you got from the customer support team today, I got to go and read all of that stuff again.
Hey, just a really quick break to tell you about the Studio 21 newsletter. If you're interested in Bitcoin and design, every month I highlight a few key pieces of Bitcoin or design related news or education. I think you're really going to find it valuable. So if you're interested, take a look. Go to sahilc.com/newsletter, give it a subscribe, and look forward to seeing you there. Now back to the episode.
So
it's such an interesting problem, and Dovetail is so cool. I'm not like sponsored by Dovetail, although it would be nice if I was sponsored by Dovetail. Maybe I'll reach out to them. But you can literally ask them like as if it was a search engine. You can ask questions to the whole corpus of data.
Yeah.
Across all your meetings.
That's
and say like,
so cool.
Oh, what do people think about gift cards? And it'll just like compile it all.
Yeah, so. And like where are the pain points? You can do all of that stuff, and if these tools really can do all of that stuff, it's an interesting side note to what is the future of a design department staff look like?
Yeah,
because now, like as a startup, we wouldn't even be able to afford it, but for a long time, I wouldn't need to hire a junior researcher because I can, even just with ChatGPT, like on a premium plan, I can compile all the transcripts from a usability study, just upload them and then ask questions to that context window until it runs out of memory and get most of the insights that I need to generate a report. And I don't need to pay someone $100,000 a year to be a staff, UX research, junior UX researcher.
It's funny because Skylar had a really good tweet recently. Shout out Skylar. it was something about like, I forgot what it was, but he was basically, he listed out, it was really funny. He had a list of a bunch of different like very specific design roles, like
Yeah.
UX researcher, motion designer, all these things. This team has 7 motion, this whatever, all these different things. I think he was basically implying that, yeah, the future is probably generalists that work with specialists on the edges to some extent, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting. And
Yeah, I think the future is going to be for the generalists. There's the nuance of strategy is something that these language models will eventually get, but they're not there today.
yeah,
But I've heard about departments at Pixar just being gutted because, you just don't need, you don't need people to generate the clouds in your movie anymore.
wow,
You just get an LLM. There used to be like a team that would do environmental,
yeah,
image generate or animation generation. That's gone.
fascinating.
We'll see that trickle into our industry for sure.
So hard left turn, super hard left
All
turn.
right.
Kind of a fun question, maybe. Do you have any hot takes on design? On like, it could be anything. It could be relationship between designers and teammates.
Hmm.
Maybe on this current zeitgeist of like some style. It could be, I don't know, what
Yeah.
else could it be?
Yeah, hot takes on and not just in our industry
Oh,
and
totally anything. Just like design could be,
yeah.
yeah,
I
broadly.
I find it really interesting when you try and structure a company and you staff these departments in any kind of, so we'll narrow it just to software products.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and all those probably apply to industrial design as well, because
Hmm.
we definitely had these problems at Nokia. But I think there's an under leveraging of the design teams in a lot of these companies that's happening more and more as we get more and more data driven, where there's some magic missing from how we develop our products now. We're like, we're looking for product to market fit. We're like trying to like find, how to build things that generate more revenue for us as a company. But you have this entire staff of dreamers who, wanted to probably be artists at some point in their lives, and that's what led them to design in the first place. And it puts them into a place where they can't really do that dreaming anymore, and they're just like kind of executing. As much as I like design systems, I think they create limitations that are kind of killing that creativity.
Hmm.
I think as much as the relationship between product and design is an important component to building software and releasing it at scale, it does kind of kill a little bit of the magic process. And that's something that I miss from the agency days of just like sitting in a room with other designers, like spitballing ideas that we were going to pitch to Nike, and having an engineer, create a prototype of that thing, and going in and like saying like, what if we built a VR, shoe closet where you can like, see what your shoe closet looks like with all these
Yeah.
different shoes, or, it's like silly, stupid stuff like that happened in agencies that you don't necessarily see in the product world anymore.
Because we
It's
need a ship.
we got to ship. Yeah, we got to get that revenue. We got to make
yeah.
those shareholders happy. And maybe, this is something that Bitcoin can also fix, because if we're not so worried about year over year growth by building new products, and we actually get, a low time preference where we can sit in a room and just spitball ideas and still, meet our quarterly goals,
Yeah.
maybe that's how we get there. But
Bring it back to the craft, basically. Just like now we're focusing on, yeah.
yeah,
That's interesting
totally.
because I almost feel like I'm almost going in the reverse direction where I feel like I still am. I used to be very much like a systems oriented, just like we're just going to ship this, we're going to focus on doing that.
Yeah,
And I think I'm slowly evolving into something maybe more creative.
we're
I never
creative. Yeah,
really even thought of myself as a creative until
yeah.
a couple of years ago,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
that's
very
interesting. Really.
vulnerable to admit right now. I've never said that to anyone, but
Well, if you were in software from day one, then that makes sense. If you
yeah.
never worked in an agency where
I
you were
never went to
doing
agency.
those,
I
yeah,
studied computer science in college, so I
yeah,
just never felt like I always felt like I was solving problems. And
mm-hmm.
then only recently I was like, wait, this is a beautiful mixture of art and science, and it's
Mm-hmm.
so not to go down that route, but yeah, that was a big change for me. So I feel like I'm kind of coming in the opposite direction, where like I'm realizing that there's a lot more to this than just like ruthless
Uh-huh.
shipping.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
the ruthless shipping like does like not to harp
No,
on it too
no.
long, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the ruthless shipping does come to the like we need to grow by X% every
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
So you have to place those pressures on your team to make that happen. So, maybe
Yeah.
this is where MicroStrategy like becomes the big innovators because they just don't have to worry about those
Right.
quarterly
They just
goals
have so
anymore.
much time,
Yeah.
so much money. Yeah, that's interesting. How are you? So I have a lot of places where I'm constantly staying up to date on like new things on design, right? Especially because, we have the Austin Bitcoin Design Club every month here in Austin. I have to, I'm almost like forced in some ways to like read up on stuff. Where are you learning new things? Do you do that at all? Or is it just like on the job, you just have no time? And it's like,
Yeah, that is a good question. And basically where I get my information these days is from Nostr.
really?
And
I didn't expect that at all.
I'm on Nostr quite a bit, so there's some artists that I like to follow on Nostr. I think for me, I'm less interested. I rely on Max and
Ah,
my
yeah.
younger, colleagues to tell me where things are going design wise, or not even younger colleagues, but people who are like kind of more in that world.
Yeah.
And I like to get inspiration from from art, going to museums. Museums has always been a big staple for me because I like to come at things from a little bit further outside of the industry,
Hmm.
and then kind of try and bring it into the industry. So I just went to Colombia for the first time this year,
Hmm.
and I went to this museum there, and I was so inspired by some of the artists. There was a big exhibition by these Venezuelan artists that did some really interesting pieces around the Bolivar and creating art out of money that doesn't have any value anymore, and creates, it's now a medium because, it's cheaper than paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost.
That's amazing.
Finding those connections between what we're doing in our industry and like what's happening in the art world, I find to be really interesting. Like what kind of Brecky's been doing with sculpture.
Oh, yeah. Shout out Brecky.
I find like that anonymous sculpture with the moving eyes was dope.
Yeah.
So like seeing how people are manipulating things in the physical world, I find to be really inspiring. And then, once I like find those inspirations, or I just kind of let them soak in, and we get a great, designer like Rachel on working on a project, I can start to pull those things into a brief, and see if we can find some kind of intersectionality between what's happening in the art world and what's happening in design. And it allows me to kind of keep doing that dreaming that I
Yeah.
was talking about before, where I'm not so limited by what's happening in a specific industry or
That does seem to be the best creatives that I see. Even just limiting to tech, right? If you look at like, I would almost even call it art, but like the products from people from Perplexity or like the browser company, right? They bring in
yeah
inspiration from so many freaking places. It's
yeah
like almost unbelievable.
yeah
I
yeah
wish I was that talented. It's just like,
it's I mean that kind of craft is amazing. And hopefully you do get Rachel on the
oh
on
yeah,
the on
yeah,
the
we
pod,
got to do
because
that.
she's doing some really cool stuff with stop motion.
Stop
And
motion, right? I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like I think a lot of designers are getting turned off to the tech world because they don't get to do that stuff. So they'll come in, they'll get burned out on
Hmm.
the stuff that we were just talking about, and they'll save up their money, hopefully in Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and take some time to go and work on the stuff that really like gives them energy. Because at the end of the day is it, right? Like if you're working on things that take energy away as opposed to giving it to you, then you're probably burned out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, dude, I feel like I have so much more to talk to you about, and I think we need to do a part two at some point. Like
Yeah, that'd be
maybe
great.
maybe the next time we meet.
I'm gonna be
But
here for the next almost 2 months. So,
in Austin?
well, in Texas,
Oh,
between
in
here and
Texas.
Houston.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have to do one at some point. But I guess we're kind of like wrapping up. We're almost back home, basically.
Yeah.
Where do you see? It's a very big question, but like, where do you see Bitcoin design kind of going
hmm
from where we're at now? I mean, we've evolved so much, right? Like
hmm
some of my friends were using like wallet.dat files. It's like we've completely changed, right? So where do you feel like things are going, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and it kind of goes back to our roots back in San Francisco when we first
Yeah.
met,
Oh,
and we
that's
were
true.
at
We
those
did.
Lightning meetups,
Wow.
and it was like, oh,
Throwback.
Lightning's the future,
It
but
was like
like,
2018, 19 or something like that. Wow.
yeah, yeah, and Lightning probably still is the future, but it's constantly reshaping itself, and now it's
Yeah.
looking more like, people just don't know how to manage their liquidity, and your average user is just not going to be able to do that. So a node operator is going to be more the type of person that's going to do that. And then you have these like kind of fediments and other things that are kind of looping those things together. So I think, you know, the layers that make the Bitcoin stack are going to constantly be reshaping and reconfiguring themselves, and designers, it's going to be our job to figure out how to make it as easy as possible, so you don't need to know what channel balancing is, or you know how to print eCash or any of that stuff. You just open up the product and you move the money around, and no one can tell you otherwise. And it's easy.
It's so, I don't know if you feel this way, but to me, it's so incredibly exciting.
Yes.
That job, it's like the best job.
It's the best job.
There's nothing better.
It's the best job.
There's nothing better. It's amazing.
It's because, yeah, you get to give people their freedom back, and, you know, create some of the like most interesting user experiences on top of it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not very many industries you get to say you can
There's
do
not
that.
really many. Yeah, there's not a lot. Cool, man. So I guess last question for you, personal growth. What are you thinking of next? Like, what are you looking to prioritize next? And then, yeah, I guess, well, what are you working on? Which we already know, but.
Yeah. So, yeah, keeping the Fold engine running, definitely a priority. Seeing, you know, what the next, I've been there for a little more than 2.5 years. I'm really excited about the next 2.5, which is, I think, the first time I've ever said that about any company I've worked at. Usually it's about now I'm looking for other opportunities. But Fold's just one of those places where you just want to stay.
That's awesome.
And so, you know, that will be a priority. I think from a personal growth standpoint, I'm trying to marry my love of the Spanish language and of Latin American culture into, you know, what I'm doing day to day at work. So I think I'll probably be spending a lot more time in Latin America next year, planning a trip to drive the van through Mexico. And if I'm feeling really brave, maybe drive it down to El Salvador and Costa Rica and check out some of those circular economies down there.
That'll be awesome.
And yeah, and see how I can help the, you know, next generation of Bitcoiners down there, maybe the next generation of designers to, you know, and build the industry from all angles.
Whew. That's huge. That's huge, man. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for you. Yeah, dude, thanks for coming on. Yeah, where can people find you? I guess, I know you're on Twitter. Sounds like you're on Nostr pretty heavily.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Nostr. I'll give you those handles.
Yeah,
I'm not super active. I'm more of a stalker on those places, but yeah.
And I guess, how can people be, I mean, not that I have like millions of listeners, but I know people who are listening, they're really smart. They're really freaking smart. How can they be helpful to you, useful to you in any way? Is there anything you're looking for, or just kind of
I'm always open to people's feedback on what we're doing at Fold, how we can do it better. I have a little database of people who are interested in participating in our usability studies. So anyone who wants to take some time out of their day to talk to me about a feature we might be releasing, that would be so helpful. Yeah, and you know, anyone who hits me up and has an idea, I'm always there to listen to it and pull it into the team and see, you know, if there's stuff that we can do to help people out.
Nice, dude. Well, thanks for coming. We're gonna get back to your dog. We're gonna get Spanish class, I guess, and then and then maybe some tacos or food or whatever. So yeah, I'm starving. But
perfect.
Yeah, cool, man. Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Okay, that's it for this walk and talk conversation on Bitcoin design. Hope you found something interesting from it. Hope you got some interesting nuggets. If you liked it, and if you want to, feel free to give it a review, share it with someone else who might find it interesting. And genuinely, if you have any feedback, I really, really want to hear about it, positive or negative. So find me on Twitter at SahilC0, and I look forward to seeing you next time.